Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the Senior Director of Event Programming at Media Post, and this is Brand Insider BTS, where I get to pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women brand marketers today. And with me is Shenan Reed. She is the Global Chief Media Officer at General Motors. Hey, Shannon.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fabulous.
Well, I first have to say congratulations. It's been like 5 months now.
Almost, yep. I think actually 4 months today.
4 months. Okay. And for those not knowing, this is Shannon's fourth month at General Motors.
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome. That's such an amazing position to be in. So I love that. And as I was stalking you. So basically, okay,
I
when
noticed.
do we have to wait before you're able to actually do this interview?
That's so sweet of you. Thank you.
So, well, I also, again, including with my stalking, everyone knows that I do that. You wrote that this is talking about starting the new position, that you've been fortunate to have these leaders to really continue to serve impressions and impress. But one of the parts that I noticed, you said elevate the ad experience and balance targeting with serendipity to create great consumer experiences through media. So, of course, the term that jumped out at me was serendipity, because one, that's also kind of what you're experiencing at General Motors. And so I want everyone to first of all talk about that and how this is such a serendipitous moment for you working at General Motors.
Yeah, I mean it's the opportunity to bring a childhood passion to the work that I love to do every day. And I was so excited to even be given the opportunity to consider this as a moment. I grew up working on cars with my dad. So we had a 69 T-top Corvette that we did a frame off restoration on, which was a lot of fun. And that's the car that drove me to my wedding. If you go to my LinkedIn post about joining General Motors, there's a
I
photograph
saw it, the
in my
red.
wedding dress. Yeah, the license plate says Shenan. My dad and I did that car together. My first car that I was allowed to drive was a family car, but I was allowed to drive was an 81 Buick Regal diesel. And my dad insisted that I needed to know how to rotate the tires, how to change the oil, and how to change the glow plugs entirely by myself before I could actually have the keys to drive it. So I got tested a lot to make sure. My dad used to quiz me as we were driving down the road. Car just passed us, make and model. Which I'm not very good at anymore because it's still a challenge, but I have to say it was a lot of fun and it made car rides always really, really interesting. And I still own a 1965 Pontiac Tempest, which is my little baby that we tool around in the summer. It's a little convertible straight out of my cousin Vinny. And on my daily basis, I'm driving a Cadillac XT6.
Wow. So yeah, totally. I have to say my family is a Cadillac family. My dad, as long as I can remember, has driven a Cadillac. He's a tall guy. And so
Yeah.
I guess the Cadillac is the only one that really gives him the
The
headroom he needs.
headroom.
And so,
Nice.
but he still has one today. He just always, so we're a Cadillac family
I
too.
love it. I love it. That's great.
Now, I think so your dad, I mean, was he, all right, was the cars like a personal, like kind of something he liked to do as a hobby, or was that his job, or like why was he
So
so obsessed with cars?
yeah, a little bit of both. So he built his first car when he was a kid. Like he needed a car, wanted to build a car, so he built a car. He went to a technical high school in Rochester, New York, where he learned how to work in the machine shop and on vehicles. Um, it wasn't his day-to-day job, I would say, until my dad's a jack of all trades, master of most. He's worked in construction and engineering and sales. He is an ultimate salesman. He can sell ice to Eskimos, my mom used to say. But he worked for a company called Windsor, which sells nuts and bolts and fasteners to the auto industry. So I spent a lot of my childhood actually going to different garages, auto body shops and mechanic shops with him, aftermarket support. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to see all of that. So yeah, he was always around the industry and also always had a hobby car, because I think car people almost always have a hobby car. There's always
Yeah.
something you're tinkering with.
Yeah, no, it sounds that I know a few of those in my life, and I completely agree with that. Well, so getting back to the serendipitous moment, so we
Mm.
talked about obviously starting at General Motors and how that was for you, but on a personal level, and not that starting this amazing job isn't personal, but on a personal level outside of that career or this position, has there been that kind of moment in your life? And maybe it's a small moment or a big moment, but it turned into this like amazing happening or coincidence or however you want to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you find little connections in life when you look for them, and I think they're kind of always there. My mom has always been the one that finds these little moments where our birthdays all lined up numerically in a given year or over the course of a 12-month period. There's always these little connections that she's been able to find. I think as a result of that, I'm always looking for those little connections. The day my husband proposed, I've been married 25 years this year. His nickname for me was Ladybug, is Ladybug in Romanian. So I won't bother you with the Romanian version of Ladybug. And we were at a picnic and a ladybug landed on my hand. And I said, "Isn't that cute?" And he said, "Maybe it's a sign." And I had no idea what he meant. And he proposed about 20 minutes later. So I think there's always been these little connections along the way.
Now, was he, I know he's planning to propose. I'm not saying the ladybug
Yeah.
landing made him think of it, but was he planning to do it at that moment that day, or did they kind of spur it along?
No, I think the ladybug was just a serendipitous little happy accident that happened while we were having this picnic. And I think in some way kind of sealed the deal for him, in
Yeah,
a way, and for me.
that's awesome. I love that. And also you want to, especially when you go into like the job at General Motors, it's serendipitous, but in the sense that when you think of serendipitous, it's all good luck. And
Yeah.
that's obviously it's good fortune for you, but at the same point, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of creating that moment to have that serendipitous moment.
I think also those serendipitous moments are moments of discovery and ahas that you wouldn't have put either two and two together, or you wouldn't have connected these things otherwise, or you wouldn't have known about that product. You stumbled upon it. And in media, I always talk about it as you stumbled upon a product you didn't know you needed, right? I never thought that I was going to need that particular cotton t-shirt, but when it got served to me on Instagram, and there was just something, actually, the latest one for me is this pair of clippers for clipping your trees back that have a notching capability. So you don't have to have all the pressure on it. You can actually just notch it. It'll do the work for you. And it was like, that to me was a serendipitous moment of like, I wasn't looking for those. I didn't necessarily think that I might need something to replace what I had. But when it showed up and it was served to me, it was a bit of an aha of, oh, there's something else that's better that's out there. Maybe I need to go buy that.
Yep. And it's kind of a fun way to look at things. You know, like you said, it just gives you that, this is cool. This is all right. This is the way it goes.
Totally.
So, well, I want to ask, I mean, starting back in your career. So when you first were starting, I mean, and I noticed that you worked for the American Theater Wing, and I love what you wrote because you basically set them up on their first computer or something. Like this is for the group that does the Tony Awards.
Yes.
And like with the one to set them up on their first computer. Given you're so digitally savvy and that's your business, I mean, was that kind of a sign to come, or like in terms of, did you have that in your, like, I'm going to work in digital marketing, like when you were first graduating, which I like to ask people back that
Yeah.
when you first were starting out and venturing off into their career, was that even in your radar, or did this just another serendipitous moment, I guess?
Yeah, in some strange way. So, look, I spent 18 years as a musical theater actress growing up because I really wanted to be on Broadway and I wanted to perform. And all of that is because, I'll give you a little bit of further backstory. I got diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in elementary school, and the Houston school system didn't necessarily know what to do with a dyslexic student in the 70s. And so my mom had this kind of we'll figure it out moment. And she decided to homeschool me for a few years to try and understand how my brain worked so that she could help me get back into kind of gen pop school later. So by middle school, I went back into the general population of school. But for those couple of years that she was homeschooling me, she took it upon herself to make sure that I always had that connection to other kids, to other peers, et cetera. The thing that she did was put me into an after school musical theater class. And I made incredible friends. So where people talk about the friends that they made in high school or middle school that they're still friends with today, those are the theater kids that I grew up with. Those are still my friends today. We're still this kind of big community. From that experience, I knew I loved being on a stage. I knew I loved being a storyteller. I knew I loved connecting with people and giving people an experience. And so I really believed that I wanted to do theater for my life, for my career. And I moved to New York and had a moment where I realized I was good enough to be a working actress, but not good enough to have my name above the marquee. And the life in theater is tough. It's a constant churn, and I see my friends who still go through it today, and I think they're incredible for what they do, and I'm so grateful that they do it because I love live theater. But I thought, there's something really interesting about the other option I had when I went to high school. Houston is great for these magnet schools. And I had two options of high schools that I got accepted to for the magnet program. One was a high school for performing and visual arts, which is where I went to school as a dance major. The other was the high school for engineering. You would not normally put those two things together in one person, but I loved engineering, math, science, how things work. I think it comes from tinkering on cars with my dad. I love to kind of put puzzles together and figure out how things work. And so at that moment of, do I continue with the theater or do I find something else? There was a company that didn't know that I was the daughter of one of their customers who did consumer packaged goods analytics called Spectra. And I went to interview for a job with them because I had seen my mom playing with their tool and I would tinker with it with her. And I just thought it was so interesting to try and understand the psychology of the consumer, but the math, the propensity to have products in your shopping cart, et cetera. So I just thought it was so much fun. And I interviewed and got a job with them, and they figured out who I was and who I was related to the day that I was in my first training session.
Mhm.
And I knew more about the tool than the trainer did.
Huh.
So I asked a really difficult question, I guess, or a pointed question about how the tool could do something differently than how he had demonstrated to us. And he goes, "You're not related to Dee Reed, are you?" And I was like, "I'm her daughter." He was like, "Ah, now that makes sense."
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, which was pretty fun. So no, I didn't. When I was at the American Theater Wing, I started as Isabel Stevenson was the president of the American Theater Wing when I was there, and I started as her executive assistant. And I thought when I graduated school that I really wanted to stay close to the theater, that I was going to have some career that meant theater production or just being around the theater in some way, shape, or form. But this serendipitous moment of loving the tool that my mom was working and seeing a job that was open at a company that she was working with led me to consumer packaged goods analytics, which somehow led me to digital media that led me into this entire world of
Yeah.
advertising, which I love.
Well, I mean, it almost seems like, as you said, growing up with always tinkering on cars, and that was such an important connection with your dad, and then with what you saw from your mom. So that was there, and so really, I think, and when you talk about acting, that's very much in marketing. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
absolutely.
Understanding how people work, understanding how they think. So even though it seems like very extreme worlds, you can kind of see, especially today, where you can't be a marketer without being a digital marketer. It seems
Absolutely.
how it kind of evolved together. Was there a time as you're going through your career that you kind of were like, okay, this is the direction. This is you're embracing two sides of it, or did it just sort of keep happening and moving forward to the positions that you saw that were opportunities?
Yeah, well, so when we launched Morpheus, because I launched my own
Right,
agency
right,
in
right. That's
March
true.
of
Yes.
2001, right? And so I left Spectra. I went to go work for a digital media agency. And the reason I ended up at a digital media agency was I loved figuring out who the audience was and what caused them to put other things in their cart. And I had had dinner with a friend of a friend who shared with me this world of digital media. And he was like, but we know that if you see the green banner and you go to the website and you actually make a purchase, we know that it was you that saw the green banner. And I was like, wow, that direct connectivity of digital, it seems so cool compared to these big panels of data that I'm using to try and extrapolate the entire United States. And so I went to go work in digital media because I thought it would be really interesting, and it certainly was, and set me on a path for the rest of my career. That opportunity, um, as it led to Morpheus, was not planned. None of that was planned, because if you think about the timing of Morpheus, I started working in digital media in 99. In 2000, the bubble burst. And by early 2001, all of the companies were laying people off. And so the digital ecosystem was kind of crumbling around us. And we had to figure out what to do next. And
Right.
I asked the guys who were running that particular agency that I was working for what they were going to do. And they said, we're going to turn into a consulting company. And I said, but I have clients that I care about, like the New York Times. Michael at the New York Times is my client. I care very much about him. And he said, call him and see if he's willing to work with you directly. So I did. But it was just, again, maybe it's a bit of serendipity, good timing, an opportunity to say, hey, let's just continue to get a paycheck until such a time as either we get another job or something comes of this. But I
Right.
didn't build a business plan for Morpheus in the beginning. It was we're going to do this and figure it out. And then at some point we'll figure out what it means. it just kind of evolved. And the next thing you know, we're 100 people, we're 200 people. We are the agency of record for most of the luxury businesses across the United States and Europe. And the business was just on fire, which was really exciting. And it was this kind of digital boom. Did I plan it? No, it was always just being open to opportunities. It was being open to conversations. It was being curious about what could possibly be next and doing the work that we did with excellence. So I always tried to hold the work to the absolute highest of standards. If I'm going to see an ad, I want to make sure that it's in a place that I would be proud to see that ad and that my brand would be proud to be associated with. And that we're controlling for yes, the best prices, but also the best placements and the best quality of what we do.
No, I think that's amazing. And the fact that you grew a company that was basically not by accident in terms of starting it, but really it was just a means to an end. As you say, like when people it's how you respond to maybe bad situations, because
Yeah.
losing your job is, let's face it, it's a bad situation, but you
Yeah.
responded in a positive way, which then built it along the way. So what made you then want to sell it and move on to the next
The next
opportunity?
chapter. Yeah. So the sale was an interesting moment because it was a moment of realizing where the marketplace was going. We were a digital only media shop, period. We did not have international capabilities. We were focused on the US and we didn't do traditional media. And we were very early in the marketplace at a time when most of the big holding companies hadn't really figured out how to integrate digital into what they did. And they were starting to build their digital divisions. And so we were in this very lucky, really special place. And because we had luxury clients, other luxury clients wanted to work with us because we had the sensibility of luxury, which also helps. And as we sat back and started to assess the market, we lost one really big client. We lost the client not because they didn't want to work with us, and actually they were quite sad to lose us, but economically, because we as a total percentage of their media was pretty high, their big holding company agency that worked with them globally had offered to take on the entire business, including digital, if they moved it over for an effective rate that was a quarter of what we would have charged because we were a small shop with a very deep expertise and they could amortize that over the course of the larger business, which makes sense. Totally understand why they did it. They also wanted a global footprint with their digital media. It all made logical sense. It didn't make it any easier to have some hard conversations with people that I loved and cared about very dearly, who all were consoling me about them losing their jobs, which was a really sweet and tender moment to be in. And I helped every single one of them find another position. And that was the mission was, you're going to land and I'm going to help you land and we're going to figure this out together. But after that particular moment is when we realized this consolidation effort's going to continue. And either we need to become part of something bigger, or we need to step away and do something different. And so we consolidated with a creative agency, and long story short, that long-term didn't ultimately work out for them after we left the business, but Morpheus, I think, still retains a great reputation in the marketplace, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah, no, and I do think that that's coming to that realization when you say you decide whether you're going to go off and do something else or fold into something where I would think something that was yours, even though it's your team, but it's yours. And then to have the powers that be who are going to maybe have more say or want to cut things. Maybe they won't be as things have to be. I don't
Right.
know what they did. So I'm not saying
It
anything.
happens.
Maybe they don't keep up to your standards. Maybe, so I would think that would have been the harder choice. I mean, were you thinking along those lines or like
The pressures are different. We had a couple of conversations with like big holding companies versus small equity companies versus small creative shops. And we ultimately went with a creative shop because we felt like it was a better fit. The holding company is nothing against what they do in the purchasing of the businesses. But you're right, the dilutive factor there can be a challenge, right? Like you do have powers that be that want to see revenue outputs. They're giving you goals. They maybe are asking you to sell a product back to your client that maybe you don't believe in yet, or you don't think is right for the client, but you've got revenue targets that you now need to hit. And I had really, we had prided ourselves at Morpheus about making sure that we were always doing what was best for the client and best for their business. Our job was to drive consumers to their sites. That was what we were here to do. And we were to do it as efficiently as we could, but by placing them in the places and spaces that made the most sense. And also the consumers had a great experience. My grandmother always said, show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are, right? So I think the context and quality of where you run is as important as making sure that you're reaching the right person. And so, yeah, there is a dilutive factor that can happen. It was a risk. So I think we made the right choice at the end of the day. I try
I'd
not to
say
look back
today,
on any of it and be regretful of any of it along the way.
yeah.
I wouldn't be where I am, and I'm so grateful and happy for where I am if all of those experiences hadn't led to here.
Yep. No, I totally agree. I think you landed okay.
Thanks. I
So,
think so.
you don't have to worry about that. But no, but I do think it's really about knowing who you are and
Yeah,
knowing what makes the most sense for you at that time. So,
yeah,
and I love what your grandmother said. I think that's what you seeing who your friends are is who you are. That's, I think, very insightful.
good
So
advice.
I'm curious. So speaking of what people, when they meet you, what do they first think? Like, what do they get wrong about you? I guess would be
Oh.
the more accurate.
That's an easy one. The first thing people get wrong about me is they immediately think I'm an extrovert. I know I come across as an extrovert, and I know that people would like to argue that I am an extrovert, but that whole concept of like, where do you get your energy and what drains you? I just show up with a lot of energy. By the end of an evening, I am drained, but I love being on a stage and I do love having a microphone and I love being able to pull an audience together to tell a story, to create an emotion, to educate people. I love being a teacher and an educator. But if you invite me to a party that has a cocktail hour for an hour beforehand, trust I'm going to show up 5 minutes before we actually sit for whatever the event is.
Yeah.
Cocktail hours are not my time.
Yeah, I think it sounds like I feel like I'm in that category too. I think I was watching the Today Show or something, and they were talking about how there's introverts, extroverts, and then they called it something. I never can remember the name, but it's sort of that person who can be very outgoing, come across as the extrovert, but when they need to be on their own, they need to be on their own. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I need my alone time, but
Yeah.
I can also be at a party and talking and being out there and whatever on stage. But then when I don't want to be around people, I'm like, close the doors, and I need that. I can't keep go. I need to suddenly say, okay. So I feel like there's like, I don't know, someone needs to write in and tell me what the name is, but there's it's something where you kind of need those both sides of you.
Exactly. I think we all need a recharge on occasion, right? And I did it this weekend. I found this moment. I was like working away on things and plugging away at things around the house and whatnot. And I started to feel myself getting a little bit of a sinus headache. And I stepped out into the bright sunshine we had in New York this weekend. And I just went, I really needed that. I needed to sit here next to my plants and like pick at a couple of little flowers that needed to be deadheaded and just listen to the birds. And it was a recharging moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely need that. Well, I want to go back to the car thing.
Oh,
So
yes.
you had the Corvette, the wedding picture. I love that with you with your wedding gown lying on your red Corvette.
Yes.
But so
The only time my dad has ever let anybody touch the paint of that car.
oh really?
I got away with murder in that moment.
Was he more concerned for the car than your dress?
Oh, by far.
Sure. Okay, so I always do my little get a little history involved. So the Corvette the name of it was inspired by maneuverable warships used in World War II. And that's called Corvettes, of course. And it was chosen to evoke like agility and speed and sort of a kind of a hint of daring. So that was the whole premise of coming up with the name Corvette. So
yeah,
the question in a long diluted way of saying it, or
love it.
Whatever not diluted, I'm not diluted. Whatever the word I was thinking of. I want to ask you, many times they say a car is indicative of who the person is, like, or a person chooses a car based on who they are, and sort of it represents them. The Corvette is a perfect example that we see a lot of times. So what car, and I'll give you two, what car represents you? Okay, we're going to have a GM car. We're going to have a General Motors. But then I also and it may not be a car you ever bought or whatever, but something that you can look at and say, okay, that's Shenan.
I love that question. So I might have known that you were going to ask me this. And I might have actually asked ChatGPT what car it thinks Shenan Reed is. And I also asked it if I were a classic car, what would I be? And its answers could not have been more spot on. So the first question I asked was, what car would I be? And its answer was the Cadillac Lyric. And I love that answer, not just because I feel like I'm heart and soul the Cadillac consumer. Cadillac has a huge connection to music and artistry. And so I feel very connected. The sound system in that car is a dream. You've never felt like you're sitting in your own jazz club. And then when sitting in a Cadillac listening to jazz, it's my favorite thing to do. But it's also innovation, and it's all about the technology, and it's an electric vehicle, and it's about the future. And so I just feel like it's a perfect representation of a little bit of old school styling, a little bit of history of the Cadillac brand. It's got all of these beautiful finishing touches on the inside of it. And so it's quite an elevated experience, but it's also got this modern twist, which makes it exciting. So
Yeah, that's
I
great.
hope that I represent the Cadillac Lyric, because I
I
think
can see it. I can totally see it. So, all right. And we're
classic
gonna
car. Okay, the classic car could not have also been more spot on. And I loved it. It was the 63 split window Corvette. It's the only year the Corvette came with a split window. It's super unique. It's super rare. It's speedy. It's fast, but it was a technological innovation at its time. And it's got a lot of old school charm while also having a lot of speed and excitement.
Okay, so I have to ask, did you
Yeah.
mention to ChatGPT that you worked for GM?
I did not.
Yeah.
I did not. But here's
Okay.
something really interesting. And I was trying to figure out, like, how did it give me two GM cars, right? How did that solution come to be? And, ChatGPT is based on a good amount of training of the open web. And I have mentioned
So
General
if
Motors.
you're
I
gonna
have
go to
posted
LinkedIn,
pictures of cars in the past, my LinkedIn post, right? If it's updated enough to have that LinkedIn post in the data set, it might. So I think it probably made the connection. I have posted about my Pontiac Tempest in the past. I've posted about my dad's Corvette. So I think it figured out I'm a
that's
GM.
probably right. I'm gonna afterwards, not right now. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT what car I would be, and I will post it to you and
I
let
want
you
to know.
like it's gonna be an Edsel or something. Is that
It's
the name of
really
it?
unique special capabilities. The Edsel was a classic.
We'll see what it ends up being. Okay, but I am definitely going to do that. All right. So I also saw that you had done an interview with
Oh yeah, Jamie.
Inspire Human Resources,
Mhm.
and it's really the interview was based on your first 100 days, I
Yeah.
guess, sitting at General Motors and what you were. It was very much focused on the job at General Motors and what you've been accomplishing, what you were planning to, that kind of thing. So I want to pose the same questions, but not about what you're doing at General Motors, but about you. So
Okay.
let me make sure I get the questions.
Mm.
Okay. So what is the core of building any relationship for you? So both business and personally.
Yeah, I think the core of building any relationship starts with honesty and curiosity. I love learning about people and their histories, and knowing who they are and what they're up to, and what makes them thrive, what gets them excited, what gets you out of bed in the morning, what are the things that are passionate about. I like to know that about my team as much as I like to know it about the people that I'm friends with outside of work. I don't have a large friend group outside of work. I have a large acquaintance group outside of work. I have very few, and I think we all do, a very few core, like true, hard and true friends. But knowing what makes people get excited and what their passions are, I think is huge. So I like to be just super curious.
Yeah, no, I love to hear people's stories. I mean, that's really what I wanted to be, reporter, journalist, since I was in, junior
Yeah.
high. And it was just because I loved hearing everyone's stories, whether it's, a celebrity or, person who lives down the street. Like, it's just, to me, that's just, it's
Yeah.
so, like, you just want to hear what makes them tick, where they came from, where they're going. And I think everyone just has their own little take, and it's just
Yeah.
really interesting to hear.
There
So,
was a journalist trick that I learned years ago, and I can't remember you might even know, that there was a journalist who had done a bit of research on their own when they were first starting out. They would record every interview that they made, and they realized that they would spend an hour with somebody and come away with 5 minutes of that person talking because their questions were so long. But they realized if they asked shorter questions and they stepped back for a minute, the volume of information, and if you paused and let somebody fill in the blank as opposed to filling in the blank for them, you get even more. And
yeah,
so I try to deploy those tactics when I'm meeting people or getting to know people, even on my team or outside.
Yeah. No, I get that in a sense. Well, so, like part of it is that I do like you pause. Sometimes silence isn't always easy for me, like especially when I'm doing like the summits and I'm up in front of the group and
Yeah.
it's hard for me to give them that extra beat because
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, I got to feel that. So I do realize, but if you just have that little extra beat, you might then get more answers and things said. So I totally agree with that. For me though, I like it being. I think it's a conversation for my like at least that's my style. You know what I mean? Like so I will share some stuff about me because then I think it's helpful to them to feel comfortable. So it's a give and take. I don't know. So that's sort of how I look at an interview. But again, my interviews aren't hard hitting. It's
No.
not like I'm, in the New York Times and, hey, tell me how you killed this, whatever. I don't know.
Yikes.
Whatever. Like, I don't know. Like, so
Yeah.
I think it's just different times. But for me, it is about research. You need to know, like, you respect them enough to know about them. And
Yeah.
then hopefully they'll respect you enough to want to talk to you and share those things. So,
Exactly.
okay. So I have another question.
Mm.
Side of work, can you
Mm.
share a mistake or failure that you learned from and were redirected into a positive way?
Ooh, outside of work, I have a good work one. Outside of work's an interesting one. Um, I mean, other than my husband constantly reminding me to close the cabinet doors in the kitchen. Uh, and I don't know that that's redirected in a positive way. Um, I will on occasion have what my family refers to as jazz hands. And I think it's the performer in me. So if I get nervous about something or I don't really fully know the answer to something, they say that I go into this like, these aren't the droids you're looking for, um, kind of moment to say like, maybe I redirect, etc. And they've given me really good feedback over the years. My family is amazing, my kids and my husband, to say like, it's okay to not know the answer. Like, you don't have to know the answer to everything. And I think there's a desire, at least I always have this desire to, if you ask me a question, I feel like I should know. And that's translated into work over the years too. How do I make sure that it's okay for me not to know, for my team not to know? The world around us is changing so rapidly. And I remember when my husband and I used to read the newspaper together every day, when we had time to sit and read the newspaper together every day because we commuted on the train every day, with the newspaper. And so at the time, we both knew all of the same stories because we had read about those same stories together. And now
Right.
with the proliferation of podcasts and time listening to other materials, traveling, listening to different markets, different radio stations, reading different topics online, et cetera. We both come from different places when we sit down and talk about what's happening in the world. And sometimes there's this tendency to feel like, oh, I should have known that.
Yeah.
And giving myself permission to say, it's okay not to. I can't know every news story that's happening out there and also know everything I need to know for my job.
Right.
More important probably to
Why
know the
not?
job.
Why not? No, and I'm curious. I think it's a woman thing too. Like I do feel
Probably.
like sometimes it's part of it is you need to like you want to know. You feel like you need to want to help. Like
Right.
you want to give them the answer that they're looking for. And I
Right.
think that women tend to feel that way more than. And again, I don't really like stereotyping, but I do feel like that's something that I hear a lot of.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
All right, I have time for one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is something small, maybe even inconsequential, that that people don't know about you? Maybe a talent that people don't know about you.
I'd say a lot of people don't know that I raise butterflies.
Really?
My little side, I wouldn't call it a hustle because I don't sell them. It's my little contribution to the pollinator population. I discovered on a pot of parsley that I planted about 5 or 7 years ago in my front porch that there was a little caterpillar that I thought was adorable. So I took some photographs of it to figure out what it was. And I realized that it was a black swallowtail butterfly and that they plant their eggs on parsley. And so every year I plant probably more parsley than any one person should own, unless you're a farmer. And I wait for the eggs to get laid and I bring them in and I create little habitats for them until they grow up and turn into beautiful butterflies. And then I release them out into the wild.
Wow, that's awesome. So like that happens, is it like a screen house? Like do you see
I
you
have
have
little like butterfly nets. They're just bought on Amazon, like these like cubes that you can like unwind and open up in little zipper compartments because the swallowtails, the caterpillars go through 3 or 4 different stages and they just eat the parsley. That's all they need. They just need to eat parsley. They will eat an entire plant. And I've got some really funny little videos of one that looks like a typewriter doing a return. Like he just does this across a leaf. It's hilarious. And they're fast. And when they're big, they eat really fast. I've gone so far as to weighing them on micro scales to see how much they weigh at certain stages. And just tracking their entire progress. I've learned which ones are girls and which ones are boys based on the colors on their on their wings when they go out into the world. And so I try to track how many I have in any given year, and also how many girls and boys I've produced that given year.
That's
So
awesome.
waiting for my first eggs of the season. I'm hoping. Last year was I had 2 butterflies last year. The previous year I'd had 30. So I'm hoping that this year is another booming year.
Very cool. So is it traumatic saying goodbye to them?
No, no.
Off?
I might have had one that was a bit of a traumatic ending because he wasn't quite ready to fly, and he tried and he flew into the street and then got hit by a car.
Oh.
So that was really sad, because you feel like I helped him get here and then it just didn't quite happen. So I try to be a lot more careful about where I release them so that they can get into a tree and have some time to finish getting the blood pumped into their wings before they go. So, but it's a little sad, but also a little exciting because they come back to the same place to plant their eggs again. So
Yeah.
they could, they live only 48 hours or so. So they go out, they create their eggs, and they come back and they plant more eggs. And then there's a whole collection of them that will, what we call, overwinter. So they go into their chrysalis and they stay in their chrysalis from about October until April. And so they overwinter in the chrysalis, and that's the batch that you get for the next year.
Wow.
The whole
Very
process.
good. Did not realize we would get this little class of biology, not biology, what is it considered?
Lepidoptery, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I got that right.
Shenan, you were full of surprises. So thank you so much. You can do butterflies and you can fix your car. So
And, try to be a jack of all trades. What can I tell you?
yes, definitely, just like your dad.
Exactly.
Well, Shenan, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure getting to know you and
Thank
chatting.
you.
So, and thank you for watching. And please, if you know someone that you want me to pull back the curtain on, please let me know who, and I will do my best to get her. Thank you. And thanks again, Shenan.